Okay, wow. So I saw an article published a few days ago that isn't getting traction in the news, and well, frankly, it's a little bit scary to me. Now, please rest assured, I did my best to verify this information, even talking with a friend who has direct knowledge of the situation. I'm going to read parts of the article and talk about what I think might actually be going on. Buckle your seatbelts, kids. It's going to be a bumpy ride. Okay, so you clicked on the thumbnail. You must have a decent idea what I'm talking about today, but in case you don't, Axios published an article citing classified intelligence discussing Cuba and the potential threat to the United States. Now, I'm going to go back and forth here to make sure that I cover what I think is important in the article. According to Axios, Cuba has taken possession of over 300 one-way attack drones. Source of these drones are from Iran, with most of their components coming from Russia. Not only that, but they've also received training from both Russia and Iran on how to best implement these drones. A leaked intelligence briefing said that Cuba recently began making plans to use the drones to attack Guantanamo Bay, U.S. naval ships, and potentially Key West. The U.S. government said that Cuba isn't an imminent threat. Hell, even intelligence officials emphasized that the discussions regarding Cuba's potential strikes on U.S. targets were framed as defensive and deterrent strategies rather than an impending plot. Now, I'm not sure what the U.S. government's definition of imminent is, but to me, imminent means impending, menacing, threatening. So potential strikes on U.S. targets, to me, that sounds pretty threatening. So you might ask, how big of a threat is it? Well, if you look at the naval warships over in the Middle East, you know that these drones aren't really effective at hitting their naval targets, but keeping them from hitting U.S. warships does require vigilance, munitions, and a combat air patrol, 24 hours a day. So do I think Cuba could be a threat to the U.S. warships in the Caribbean or the Gulf of Mexico? Probably not, unless they catch us with their pants down.
Should we tell him his pants fell off?
No, let's wait a while.
So what about Guantanamo? Are the drones a threat there? Absolutely. There are approximately 2,200 U.S. service members stationed at Guantanamo. Now, how you or I feel about this duty station or its purpose isn't the topic. Besides, there's only 15 detainees there, well, that we know of. But don't forget that we, as a nation, have care and custody over 15 people and are responsible for their well-being. Add to that, the 2,200 service members we're also responsible for. Now, the CRAM should be able to take out the one-way drones for sure, but does Guantanamo even have a CRAM? I have no idea, but I hope for their sake they do. Now, what really caught my eye is when Cuba mentioned Key West. Now, I don't know what model drones they have, but from what I know about the inventory of their suppliers, the ones with the Russian parts is the Shahed 136. This claims to have a range of about 1,500 miles. Now, there's really no way of knowing if this is true or not because Iran hasn't hit targets out that far, but let's just say for the sake of argument that it has half of that, 50%. That's 750 miles. Key West is just 90 miles from Havana. Miami, about 300 miles. Now, the Shahed 136 can only do about 110 miles an hour, so a target like Miami, you got about 3 hours from launch to impact. Hell, you got 3 hours to intercept that thing, but in reality, you have less than an hour to knock it down while it's over open water. Take any more time than that, and then you're shooting an attack drone over populated areas of the continental United States. Now, NORAD can spot a fly ball at Dodger Stadium. MacDill Air Force Base can pick it up on radar. Naval Air Station Jacksonville will see it on screen as well, so it won't go unnoticed, but scrambling armed fighter planes, putting up armed Apaches, that takes time. The U.S. doesn't park aircraft stateside loaded with weapons. Arming military aircraft inside the U.S. requires authorization, lots of personnel, and then more authorization. So, do you remember the national headlines about El Paso's airspace being shut down? Now, imagine the state of Florida's airspace being closed. Miami International receives over 1,000 flights a day, and that's just one of the 20 commercial airports in Florida. It's important to note here, the U.S. has to get this right every time. Cuba only has to get it right once, because Disney World ain't got no CRAMs. Now, again, the U.S. said here, and I'll read it directly, U.S. officials don't believe that Cuba is an imminent threat or actively planning to attack American interests, but U.S. intelligence indicates the island's military has been discussing drone warfare plans in case hostilities erupt as relations with the U.S. continue to deteriorate. So, yeah, the U.S. says Cuba is just planning to use them as a defensive posture. Now, where have I heard this line before? Oh, yeah, that's right. Look, these are not nuclear missiles. The level of threat is much different than it was in 1962. So, what are my thoughts? First off, yes, the relations between the U.S. and Cuba has been going down the shitter and fast. It shouldn't be a surprise that Cuba is talking to Russia and Iran. It also shouldn't surprise you that Cuba is obtaining military drone systems. In fact, there's a report saying that Cuba has been looking into acquiring drones as far back as 2022. Now, the U.S. government says that Cuba won't attack the U.S. with the drones, and, well, we all believe what the government says, yeah? Look, man, if you back a guy into a corner, what do you think's going to happen? Now, Cuban Foreign Minister Bruno Rodriguez said on X, without legitimate excuse whatsoever, the U.S. government builds day after day a fraudulent case to justify the ruthless economic war against the Cuban people and the eventual military aggression. Cuba neither threatens nor desires war. It defends peace and prepares itself to confront external aggression in the exercise of its right to legitimate self-defense recognized by the UN Charter. Now, Cuba isn't denying having these drones. They say they are preparing themselves, which is the proper response when questioned on a global stage. I mean, it's just what you gotta say, man. Now, I see arguments being made online that this is Trump's push for war and that intelligence is being misrepresented or fabricated to lead the U.S. into conflict. I read a response on X saying that the intelligence report could invoke the Iraqi weapons of mass destruction precedent. Stupid comparison, if you ask me, given Cuba's proximity to the U.S. mainland. So, what do I think the response should be? I don't know, man. I'm not a military strategist. I do know that parking some warships north of Cuba could help prevent any drones from hitting U.S. soil. However, this could be seen as escalation. Now, what I can say with confidence is that when the president of the U.S. says stuff like this...
Taking Cuba, I mean, whether I free it, take it, I think I could do anything I want with it. You want to know the truth?
And then you send the director of the CIA to Cuba to have a chat. You aren't really cooling anything off. Instead, you're sending the world a message. If you want to have a real discussion with Cuba, you send Marco. Florida was his home state, for fuck's sake. You send the Secretary of State and some diplomats. You don't fucking send the spy guy. In my eyes, this move is intentional. Now, I don't think it's going to come to like a Gulf of Tonkin thing, but it fucking could. Look, if someone comes and tells me they want to take my land by force, well, I prepare for war. Now, I don't have a snowball's chance in hell at winning that war, but I won't go down without a fight, and I think most nations share that sentiment. So, to the U.S. policymakers, I know you aren't watching, but I want to say this to you anyway. You're a statesman. Act stately, for God's sakes. And whatever you do, don't back a man into a corner. He's going to come out swinging. I think Patrick Swayze said it best.
Nobody puts baby in a corner.
Well, that's it for me. Thank you so much for watching. If you have anything to add, please leave your comment below. Until next time, have a good day. Why does the U.S. have to piss in everybody's fucking Cheerios, man?